Okay, I'm Maestro Orlando Giovanni. I'm the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal for Ansteorra, and today we're going to give a Youth Rapier Marshal authorization course. My hope is that eventually this sort of a course will be required for anybody that's getting authorized, but right now under the rules it's not. So without further ado, here's our agenda for today. Just real quick, I'm not going to talk through it, but you can see what we're going to go over today. Organization of Youth Rapier in Ansteorra. Now, this to me is a very important subject. I think a lot of people don't understand how the marshalate is organized fully in Ansteorra. So from the top down, you'll see that I'm the Kingdom Rapier Marshal. I actually report directly to the Earl Marshal. I don't report to the Kingdom Rapier Marshal. So the Kingdom all the Youth Rapier Marshals report directly to the Earl Marshal. So I'm a direct deputy of the Earl Marshal, and of course a warrant is required. A warrant is any marshal that is on a Kingdom roster that's signed off by the Crown. And to be a warranted marshal, you have to have a membership in Ansteorra. The next thing we have are the regional marshals. That does include the principality. Principality is just considered an extra special regional marshal. They report directly to me. They are warranted and they maintain a roster just like I do. And they maintain a roster of branch marshals. The branch marshals are the guys everybody's most familiar with. They bring the gear to practice. They make sure that all the waivers are signed. They make sure that people have the guardian paperwork that they're supposed to, all that sort of thing. They're warranted and they do require an active membership. And then there's authorizing marshals, which is our final warranting marshal. This is kind of a special category. You can be an authorizing marshal at large. Technically, to be an authorizing marshal, you have to maintain a membership. But also, branch, regional, and kingdom marshals are also authorizing marshals as well, and they can conduct youth rapier authorizations. Marshal in charge is not necessarily a warranted officer. Marshal in charge is an adult that is authorized to hold youth rapier practices or to marshal youth rapier. They do need to have a current background check, but they're not required to be warranted. So that's just a marshal at large. And then that's the marshal in charge. Yeah, that's the marshal at large. Step back to marshal in charge. Marshal in charge is any marshal that's in charge of the youth rapier activities, an event or at an activity. The marshal in charge does not have to be a warranted officer, but they have to have a warranted officer available. So for instance, your marshal in charge could be a youth rapier marshal that drove in from the barony next door, but you do have to have a warranted officer there available. So it could be the seneschal and then a youth rapier marshal. But they're the final call at events or at tournaments or at local practices, that sort of thing. They're the person that's responsible for any marshal calls. Any questions on that?
You said a seneschal could be who you
seneschal could count as the warranted officer that's available in the event that your marshal in charge does not have a warrant.
And in that case, they wouldn't actually need to be there on the field. They just need to be on site, correct?
They need to be at site. Yeah, they don't have to be on the field. Yep. They just have to be at the event or on site. It's just a legal requirement because the non-warranted officers can't act as agents for the SCA. Does that make sense? So in the event that there's an emergency or something like that, that warranted officer would be the person that would act as the agent for the SCA. Okay. So the rapier divisions. So rapier divisions are actually defined in the Ansteorran rules. There are no youth rapier divisions defined in the SCA rules. They simply say that the kingdoms need to define their own rapier divisions. So basically, Division 1, 2, and 3 are our youth rapier divisions. One is ages 6 to 9, and then the authorization requirements are there on the right. Basically, for 6 through 9, they can properly calibrate blows with the light rapier, and they can obey holds and other directives. The plastic foils do not count as light rapiers. They can train with them, but they have to show that they can competently use a light rapier. And we'll go over what counts as a light rapier later. Ages 10 through 13 to be authorized, they got to meet all the Division 1 requirements. And then the authorizing marshal needs to ensure that the fencer understands the armor requirements and can fence safely with a heavy rapier and can acknowledge blows. And then finally, Division 3, which is our 14 to 17 crowd, all the Division 2 requirements apply, and they're basically the same authorizing requirements as an adult. So for authorizing someone in Division 3 rapier, you're basically giving them an adult authorization, as well as any Division 1 and 2 requirements, which right now they don't actually, it's a graduated scale, so they don't actually differ from the SCA standard. And then finally, an adult minor is a minor who's been allowed to authorize them as an adult. They must pass an adult rapier authorization, and it has to be signed off from both the Kingdom Rapier Marshal and the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal, because in a sense, they're being handed over from me to the Kingdom Rapier Marshal at that point. And then we're going to go more over this. Just because they are adulted up does not make them not a minor. So they still have, so when they show up to events and practices, they still have to have a parent involved, and they still have to meet all the same requirements for being a minor. None of those requirements are outlined as part of the rapier program. They are actually SCA rules and part of the Seneschal Handbook and Kingdom Law. So the divisions have different things that they can do in tournaments versus practice. So, of course, for all the divisions, minors must have a parent present and the appropriate waivers signed in order to participate. For Division 1, Division 1 authorized fencers can only compete in Division 1 at a tournament. Of course, all of the 3 divisions can train together, but that has to be done under the advice of their parents. If the parents do not want their child, who's a Division 1 child, competing or practicing at practice with a Division 3 child, then they cannot practice together. And that goes for tournaments also. If the parents do not want their child competing against another child who's in a different division, or for whatever reason, we cannot compel that child to, or that parent to. And it's our obligation to find a way to accommodate that within the tournament or within the practice. Division 2 can compete in either Division 1 or 2, but once they pick a division to compete in the tournament, they have to stay in that division. So they can't get halfway through the tournament and decide that, oh, I'm now going for Division 2. And then Division 3 can compete in either Division 2 or 3. Same thing. They can't get halfway through the tournament and then decide that they're going to compete somewhere else. Adult minors may only compete in adult tournaments, and they must wear a yellow diamond on both gloves. At practices, an adult minor can assist at youth practices and follow the same rule as above. So they can still practice with other minors. So they can still come to youth practice, but at tournaments, they can only compete in the adult tournaments. Any questions on any of that? No? Okay. Armor requirements. Okay. So all divisions, when they're sparring, must meet the minimum armor requirements outlined in the Society Fencing Manual for Adult Rapier, except where noted below. So basically, we're just talking about exceptions. Armor may be reduced at the marshal in charge's discretion only when conducting slow skills training. And this is also in consultation with the parents. The only exception is with the Division 1 when you're using plastic weapons. Gorgets are not required when you're using the plastic foils, and skin may show. Other than that, all of the other armor requirements still apply for Division 1 through 3. And everybody on this meeting is familiar with the society level requirements for armor. And we're going to go over armor here in a few. Weapons restrictions. So this has always been a contentious one. This has always been more lore than actual law until about a year or two ago when I introduced the addendum to the Kingdom Law for youth fencing. So Division 1 in tournament can use light rapier only. Draw and push cuts are not legal blows for Division 1. They cannot use plastic foil in tournament, but in practice they can use light rapier or plastic foil. And once again, draw and push cuts are not trained as legal blows. You can practice it with them if you want, but then they have to now understand that in a tournament they can't use it. For Division 2, it gets a little trickier. It starts to gradiate a bit. Light rapier and heavy rapier are allowed in all cases. In tournaments and practice, youth fencers must match weapons. So if one of the combatants is using light rapier, then they both have to use light rapier. Conversely, if one is using heavy, then they both have to. They can't come to an agreement on it, then we just find an accommodation in the tournament to work through it. If one fencer wishes to use light rapier, they both must. Draw and push cuts may be used. And then in Division 3, heavy rapier only for Division 3. Draw and push cuts may be used, and that's both in practice and in tournament. Plus, they can still revert back to light in practice, and that's especially because a lot of your Division 3 kids may be practicing with Division 2 and 1 kids that haven't graduated yet to the heavy rapier. Okay, any questions on anything that we've gone over so far? No, pretty straightforward. And I'm going to make these slides available online as well, so, and the recording. Responsibilities of the Youth Rapier Marshal. Of course, you must know the latest rules. And the latest rules are not only the fencing handbook or the Society Youth Combat handbook or the Ansteorra participants handbook. The latest rules are also any additional addendums that have been published through one of the authorized publication channels, like the written publications, the websites, and certain social media groups as well. So any addendums that are published by one of the officers up there, either a clarification to the rules or an addition to the rules that hasn't been signed into law yet, those are still as legally binding as far as SCA policy goes as the rules that are in the actual written and signed handbooks as well. So it's your responsibility as a marshal to know all of those rules. You to maintain a current background check, to ensure a parent or guardian is available, and we're going to talk about that more in depth. And then the MIC must ensure all waivers are available, conduct armor inspections, and then ensure safe conduct during youth combat. Now, we're going to go over a couple of these more in detail. Sources of the rules. Like I said, you've got more sources than just what are up front. The Society Fencing Marshal's Handbook, Society Youth Combat Handbook, Ansteorra Law, Seneschal's Handbook. A lot of people don't think of that one. Ansteorra Complete Participants Handbook, and then any rules updates that are made via official channels. Right there is the link to where I'll post any rules updates that I publish before they've gone out. Usually at Roundtable is where they'll get officially published. So this is a big question all the time, parents versus guardians. There's actually three different types of person that is allowed to legally sign for a child and be the parent or guardian. First of all, is the actual legal parent. That's the person that's on their birth certificate. Legal guardian is effectively the same as a parent because it's somebody that has been legally by U.S. law or by state law to be a guardian and act as a parent for that child. And then finally, a designated guardian. Designated guardian is the guardian that we think of in the SCA where they have signed the minor's permission form with the that they've given the had it notarized. And so we're going to talk about that more in depth here in a second. So background check requirement. At least 2 unrelated adults must be in attendance at a practice or event with minors. Both of those adults don't require background checks, but they must be unrelated. At least 1 adult at practice with youth combat must have a current background check and be actively assisting. You can't show up and be the only person with a background check and in the kitchen cooking feast while youth combat is occurring. You have to be actively participating in youth combat and have a background check. At least 1 adult at practice or the event must be an authorized youth rapier marshal and be actively marshaling. If you are the authorized youth rapier marshal, you must be there at the activity marshaling. You can't be across site. Waivers. All minors must have a parent or guardian present. There's no way around this. The minors must have a parent or guardian present. All minors must be listed on a minor's consent to participate or have a blue card. If they have a blue card, we don't have to collect the minor's consent to participate. So what does the minor's consent to participate form look like? Well, this is what it looks like. There's actually 2 versions of this. There's one version that has, you fill out the form for a single minor, and then there's this version where you fill out the form for a single family. There is no version of the minor's consent to participate or the minor's waiver that allows you to sign up multiple children that are unrelated. So it's really a form per parent that's present because it is the parent that is giving permission for their child to participate in this activity. So each child must be listed on one of these at each and every practice. It doesn't have a longevity to it. It's a single event form. So for a 3-day event, 1 form can be filled out. For a 2-hour-long practice, 1 form has to be filled out. Every week, you have to get one of these forms if they don't have a blue card. Any questions on the waiver? And just like any other marshalate position, once you've collected all your waivers, they have to be sent in, scanned and sent in to the marshalate secretary. Okay, minor's permission and medical waiver form. This is the designated guardian, right? Must be made available by a non-legal guardian, must be filled out by the parent or legal guardian. The guardian designated on this form is still responsible to sign the minor waiver form. This is not in lieu of the minor waiver form. So this is just saying that, hey, they can sign the minor waiver form. And it's also saying that they can make medical decisions for my child, which is the primary reason for this form. And this is what it looks like. Minor's permission and medical waiver. There's actually 2 of them that you'll find out there. From everything I've seen, they're both just as legal. They both require a notary. So when you get one of these filled out, you have to get it notarized. Once again, these are per event. So if you are like I would often take my student Catherine Schaefer when she was still a minor to events, and I had to arrange with her parents to fill out these authorization forms for every single event. And, you know, we go to a lot of events. So we might have filled out 4 of these a month to get her to various events that we were going to. Any questions about this?
So the parent signs that form giving you the designated guardian ship, and you have to get that notarized and bring it to the event. Is that?
Yep. Yeah, it has to be notarized. And then the designated guardian brings it with them to the event.
And it's a designation for that event, right?
And it's just for that event. So if it's a 3-day event, then it's just for those 3 days. There is no like month long. So this is per event or per activity. So if you want to take a child to a practice every week, then you would have to fill one of these out every week for them.
That's a lot of money to spend on notary publics.
It is a lot. It's a whole lot. Any other questions? What I recommend is that you bring at least 3 of these with you to the event. You can make 3 copies with the notary. So have 3 copies notarized, 1 for you, 1 for the child to keep on them, and 1 to leave at gate in the event that they ask for it. There's not technically a requirement that they collect them, but I've been to some events where the local financial committee has wanted to collect them, and that's their call if they want to do that. Okay, so let's move on to armor requirements. Most everybody should be familiar with this, but a few things that I want to go over here. There are no real differences in heavy and light rapier armor requirements. The only difference is the one that we went over earlier, and that is for plastic foils. You do not have to cover the arms, and you do not have to wear a gorget, or the child does not have to cover their arms or wear a gorget. Other than that, all of the requirements are the same. Rigid armor is any material that will not significantly flex, spread apart, or deform under pressure, with 12 kilograms applied by a standard mass tester repeatedly to any single point. Examples of rigid material: 22 gauge steel, 20 gauge mild steel, 16 gauge aluminum, 1 layer of hardened heavy leather. Same thing with a abrasion resistant material. Material that will withstand normal combat stretches or stresses without tearing, like broadcloth, single layer of heavy poplin, sweatpants, opaque cotton, and then penetration resistant armor is any material withstand puncture as demonstrated by a passing penetration test, and then list their known materials. More details in the Society Fencing Handbook, but these rules are exactly the same as what's in the Society Fencing Handbook. No differences. Any questions on armor? No. Okay. Beware the vintage fencing mask. Only use 3 weapons masks that pass 15 kilogram punch test or push test. Just some examples here of some beauties that you can find on eBay that will not pass an SCA push test. I think Jacques owns a couple of these actually. Okay, light versus heavy. Light weapons are épées and foils. Yes, épées are legal. Foils are legal. As long as they are a standard foil, they have to be tipped in the same manner as our heavy weapons do. So they need a minimum of 1/4 inch surface area with alternating tape, so that the 2-color test still applies. The color or 3-color test, it has to be the color of the tip, the color of the tape, and then the color of the weapon. So that's why silver tape doesn't work. And then heavy rapier is our standard heavy rapier that's legal within the society. No differences there for what youth combatants would use. Some things to look for: extreme bend, no excessive rust. For light rapier, no S curves. This is something you need to remember with foil and epee, especially with the epee. An S curve is an extremely weak point on an epee that will break eventually. So always inspect your epees to make sure that you don't have any S curves in them. Inspect for burrs, proper tip and tape that meet the 2-color rule. Tip isn't missing chunks that are greater than 1/4 inch. Tip is not pushed through, flexes properly. And then blunt tip and quillions. So you can't have sharpened quillions and no other obviously unsafe features. I'm not gonna bore you with all of this. This is in the Society Fencing Manual, but just wanted to underscore that the flex requirements for weapons for the heavy rapier are exactly the same for youth as they are for adult. There's no variance there. Conducting armor inspections. Low, no-touch inspections is what I teach. I actually, to the extent that I can, I perform a no-touch inspection. What that means is that if you are in doubt about a part of the child's armor, say for instance, it's their mask, ask them to hand you their mask and test it that way. If you're in doubt about whether or not they have worn the proper groin protection or the proper underarm protection, that's what the parent's there for. Ask the parent if they have the proper protection on. Now, there are cases where we are familiar enough with the children that are there. I get that. You know, some of the children you're like an aunt or uncle to, but in most cases, it is a really, really, really good idea. And I advocate this on the adult field as well, that you don't get in the habit of verifying with tactile sensation. If you have doubts about the armor, ask the parent, and the parent can verify and help you with the armor. Always inspect the mask for the proper padding and any soft spots in the mask. The reason I really want to point this out especially is because we use a lot of loaner gear in youth combat. Almost all the gear that those kids show up with is loaner gear because kids grow so quickly that most parents can't buy their own gear. And so we tend to get in the habit of not checking the gear well enough on a regular basis because there's so much of it. If you know, I've got a dozen masks piled up, you know, I'm not going to check those masks as often as I'm going to check my personal mask. Always tug the mask to make sure to see if it lifts or not. Ask them, is the torso armor known to be good? Ask the parent. Make sure no skin is showing. Do the gloves overlap properly? And then, you know, ask, is rigid groin protection in use? You can ask them. If they're younger, then ask their parents. But either way, definitely no and low touch inspections. Any questions on armor inspections? Okay, so opening the field
Orlando,
Yeah.
are we using a push on the mask to make sure it doesn't touch the face?
Yes, you can push the mask to make sure it doesn't touch the face. I don't see a problem with that. But you should always ask the child first, hey, I'm about to push your mask. Is that okay? So always get their permission. If you feel uncomfortable in it, you can ask the parent to do that as well.
Thank you.
Hey, groin protection, is that the both sexes or what on that?
So for children that were born with you know,
Okay.
penises and testicles.
Gotcha.
They have to wear rigid protection, and for children that were not born with those, they need to have puncture resistant. So it's the same as the society standard for men, for adults.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Good questions. Okay. So opening the field and practice. I really look at the field as three different sets of things. You're either going to reject the field, mark for hazards, or warn the combatant. So reject the field's easy. If there's a hole that could lodge a foot, standing water, pipes, that sort of thing, then you as a field marshal should just say, no, we're not going to use this area. Let's go find somewhere else to use. Marking for hazards, almost never acceptable for youth combat. If a hazard has to be marked, it is likely too dangerous for a youth to fence around. And then warning the combatants, if it's loose turf in a certain area or slightly slippery spots, you may want to let them know, hey, watch out for some loose turf over here. Watch out for this slippery spot. Talk to the parents about it ahead of time. Okay, so there's two types of youth rapier combat, single combat and melee. Single combat is between two individuals, whereas melee is between more than two individuals. In single combat, combats are engaged upon the call to lay on an opponent. If an opponent is disarmed of all weapons, their opponent may allow them to regain their weapons or require them to yield. With melee, combatants are engaged with all opponents immediately upon call to lay on. Combatants may strike any single opponent they can safely reach with any legal blow if they are within a 180-degree arc of the opponent's front, as defined by the opponent's shoulders. These are pretty much the same rules as we have for adult melee, except that death from behind is not prohibited for youth rapier, but should be considered carefully by marshals. So we don't even prohibit death from behind, but I would make it a rule. I usually make it a rule at our practices that I don't allow death from behind. That said, not allowing death from behind can also cause a lot of arguments in practice too. So you may want to, at least with your Div 2 and Div 3 kids, work on them just placing the sword upon their opponent's shoulder and saying death from behind or something like that. That way they get in the habit of doing a proper death from behind where they're not actually stabbing their opponent from behind, but they're still able to attack in a 360. Any questions on that? Okay, marshaling the fields. This part's easy. Have the combatants center on the field, conduct any salutes, ask all the combatants if they are properly armed and armored. Always receive a verbal affirmative. It's required by the rules, and it's a good habit for them to get into both at practice and at tournaments. Do a last-minute visual check, call lay on, and then start applying Team A. So Team A is kind of an acronym that I came up with years ago. Well, Team was for what you should be doing when you're marshaling. So basically, I'm constantly cycling through all of this as I'm marshaling. The T is for tips. Look for missing or blown out tips. E is for edge of the world. Are they getting too close to the edge of the world? If they are, call edge of the world. Look at their armor. Has any armor come undone or is any skin showing? If so, call hold. Check their mask. Is their mask properly fastened and not riding up or coming off? And then finally, this is the addition for youth, which is active marshaling. So in youth combat, we expect active marshaling. Did the youth fencer neglect to call a blow? Are they swinging wildly? Are they being unsafe? All of those sorts of the marshal is hands-off rules that we talk about in adult rapier don't apply with youth. With youth rapier, marshals are expected to actively communicate with the youth while they're on the field. Let them know when they neglected to call a blow. Let them know when they're being unsafe, even when they're not being dangerously unsafe, but if they're being a little unsafe, or if they're not acting in a sportsmanship-like way or chivalrously, let them know. Okay, so blow acknowledgement. No different than the blow acknowledgement for the society standards. Any blow that would have penetrated the skin in the judgment of the person receiving the blow shall be counted a good blow. Kingdoms shall not alter this standard. So this is an important lesson to teach our youth combatants, is how to actually call a blow. Tournaments with differing victory conditions, for example, only headshots are explicitly allowed. So sometimes holding tournaments or mock tournaments at practice with different victory conditions, especially if you're Div 3 kids, might not be a bad idea. Get them used to the rules. Shot calibration. So any blow that gives positive pressure should count. And this is very important to teach them early on. And that's why we do active marshaling. Teach them that excessive blows can be avoided by breaking the wrist. So teach them how to actively break the wrist. Frequently conduct shot calibration with youth fencers. So we would often conduct, we'll have once a month, we'll have kind of a mock tournament day, which we just do nothing but pickup fights or nothing but sparring. And so on those days, we'll often start with just calibration, where we line them up and we have them calibrate. Or on each fencer's first fight of the day, we will have them calibrate along with their first opponent. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Okay, so now injury procedures. Remember, for serious injuries, always call 911 first. Call 911, get the medical professionals on the way. Don't wait to call 911. Don't look around for the parents. Don't look around for anything. Just call 911 and then tell everybody what happened. Once you call 911, if it's serious enough, seek first aid and then notify the parent or guardian immediately. So if a child is injured, attend to the child first. Don't run off and find their parent. If you're not ready to do that, then you may not want to be a youth marshal, because some adults are very comfortable around children until children become problematic for them. So if you're not ready to take charge and actively apply first aid to an injured child, then you may not want to be a youth marshal. So seek first aid, then notify the parent or guardian. Report all injuries that require hospitalization or similar care via phone to the regional and kingdom youth rapier marshals. So you should have their phone numbers on hand, and they're on the website. But remember, all of those other things happen first. The needs of the child and taking care of the injury happens first. Phone call can come hours later, but you should talk to them on the phone and report it telephonically first. If it requires hospitalization or similar care. And finally, submit an injury report within 48 hours. That should be done no matter what. So no matter what happened, if it was just a small cut, that was a Band-Aid got put on, that's fine. You don't have to make the phone call. Still submit the injury report. Any questions about injury procedures? No? Okay. Move on. Okay, responsibilities of the parents and guardians. Okay, so Ansteorra and kingdom law, persons under the age of 18 have some limitations involving attendance at events and participation in some activities. Minors, remember, adulted up or youth, minors with an adult authorization are still minors. Minors 15 years of age or older may serve as officers with limitations as indicated in Section 2C of the Corporate Policies of the Society for Creative Actors. All persons under the age of 18 attending an event must be accompanied by a parent or a responsible adult who is at least 21 years of age and bears a permission form published by the Kingdom, notarized and signed by the minor's parents or legal guardian. At least 21 years of age. So if it's their 18-year-old cousin, their 18-year-old cousin cannot show up with a permission form. It's got to be, so the responsible adult has to either be their parent or at least 21 years of age. Nowhere in the Rapier rules, nowhere in the youth combat rules. This is kingdom law. Seneschal's handbook. Parents are responsible for their children at all times. Parents should always know where their children are. The children are under 12. Parents should be within eyesight or earshot of their children. Parents cannot leave the site without their children unless they have provided a notarized medical authorization for children in the care of a non-parent adult. Children under 12 are not suitable babysitters at SCA events. Minors who are 15 or older are permitted to hold certain offices in the kingdom if the kingdom officer is aware of the age of the minor, and if that officer and the minor's parents approve. Minor cannot hold the office of marshal, marshal in charge. No minor can be the marshal in charge, seneschal, or treasurer, or manage the gate at an event. So your Div 3 kids cannot be a marshal in charge. They can't be a marshal. Also, if they're under 12, the parents need to be within eyesight or earshot. Oh, any questions on that? Okay. Authorizations and background checks. Youth authorization procedure. Determine what division. This is for authorizing a child. Okay. So determine what division the child will be authorized in. Ensure they understand the rules and requirements of their division. Find an authorizing marshal to conduct the in-person authorization. A parent or guardian creates an online participant's account on behalf of the minor if they do not have one. And then the parent or guardian or child logs in and submits a request for authorization to the same marshal. So they still need an online account, but the parent or guardian will create that online account using the link that I've got there. And it's to a form in Google Drive. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Marshal authorization procedure. Let your region or kingdom marshal know via email that you wish to authorize as a Youth Rapier Marshal. If approved, they will ask you to fill out the background check form. This is all changed and I have not updated it yet. What will happen is that you will be asked to send an email to your kingdom or regional marshal with your name, mundane name, full mundane name, a good email address for you, and a picture of your membership card. And of course, why you're wanting to authorize. And then once that has been approved, it'll be sent up to the Kingdom Seneschal. Kingdom Seneschal will send it off to society, and you will receive an email from the background check company, and they will guide you through the rest of the background check procedure. At some point, we will be notified that you have a valid background check, and then we can complete your authorization. I have no problem with starting the authorization process prior to the background check being completed, because that way, once the background check comes through, you can be authorized as a Youth Rapier Marshal. And right here, I've got the link. I keep this updated, just recently updated it with the newest procedures. So feel free to go to that link to see what the latest procedures are for authorizing as a Youth Rapier Marshal. Now, review the new site.